Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Ukraine This Week with me, Don Arlett. This week, President Zelenskyy reversed course on a controversial anti-corruption law that first had been rushed through the parliament and then signed immediately. Then that sparked nationwide protests and strong EU criticism. Later, he submitted a new bill aimed at restoring the independence of the bodies. We'll be discussing that in this week's edition. We'll also be talking about the threat that Russia poses to NATO. And of course, before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at this report from Ukraine over the past week.
Ukrainians took to the streets in protest after President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's government swiftly passed a controversial bill placing independent anti-corruption bodies under state control. A move widely seen as a threat to democracy.
We've been brought here by justified outrage at this law. Absolutely nobody could have expected Zelenskyy would sign it.
Zelenskyy submitted draft legislation to restore the independence of Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies, reversing course after an outburst of public criticism.
The legislation is designed to secure guarantees of independence for law enforcement and anti-corruption bodies and secure concrete methods of verifying that there is no Russian interference.
It comes after the EU and top officials across Europe urged Kyiv to reverse the law and warned that Ukraine's EU accession was at stake. Among them was Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, speaking exclusively to TVP World.
As a corrupt country, Ukraine will not make it into the EU. We have to be convinced that the authorities from top to bottom are determined to stamp out corruption.
As the saga played out this week, Ukraine's military intelligence chief Kyrylo Budanov delivered a blunt message, saying Ukrainian history shows a nation loses if it is torn apart by internal conflict. These are the first moments of freedom for Ukrainian soldiers released from Russian captivity in the latest prisoner swap.
I can't find the words to express how I feel. Finally, my brother is home. Thank you, Lord. Finally, my brother is home.
During the latest round of negotiations in Turkey on Wednesday, Russia and Ukraine agreed to further POW swaps.
I really hope that we will manage to bring back more of our warriors from captivity. The agreement is that 1,200 of them will return. We also remember the civilians, all those who need to be returned home to Ukraine.
Ukraine also once again proposed a meeting between Presidents Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Vladimir Putin for the two leaders to talk peace face to face.
We propose to the Russian side to hold such a meeting of leaders until the end of August. By agreeing to this proposal, Russia can clearly demonstrate its constructive approach to everyone around the world.
But so far, prisoner exchanges have been the only tangible result of the peace talks, as Russia refuses to bring the war to an end. This week, Ukraine faced intensified Russian assaults, with a series of drone and missile attacks targeting multiple regions. On Wednesday, Russia launched a record-breaking more than 700 drones and 13 missiles, primarily aimed at Kyiv and the Volhynia region, marking the largest single-night aerial assault since the war began. The strikes killed at least one person and injured over 40 across the country, damaging residential buildings, infrastructure and Kyiv's rail system. In Kramatorsk, a Russian bomb attack claimed the life of a 10-year-old child. Another major strike aimed at Kharkiv and Odessa, including the historic Odessa Privoz market, caused further civilian casualties and destruction. In Kharkiv alone, 40 people were injured. President Zelenskyy condemned the attacks as deliberate acts of terror, urging global pressure and sanctions to curb Russia's aggression.
And joining us now is our guest, Martina Boguslavets, head and founder of the MEZHA Anti-Corruption Center in Ukraine. Hello, Martina. Welcome to Ukraine This Week, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Yes. Now, I'd like to talk about the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine. First of all, for our viewers, can you give a brief description of what these institutions are and why is it important that they're independent of the government?
Yeah, sure. That the only one, I would say, a really independent anti-corruption institutions in Ukraine that were created after the Revolution of Dignity. And I would say they provided us for the last 10 years the only one check and balance principle of doing the investigations regarding the top officials that committed crimes in corruption. So I would say the National Anti-Corruption Bureau is the law enforcement agency, and they do the investigation. And the specialized anti-corruption prosecutor office, so they work as the prosecutors. So they simply put the case to the court, to the highest anti-corruption court. I would say that those two anti-corruption institutions, we consider them that they are like the biggest, I would say, one of the biggest results of the Revolution of Dignity and of the reform, of the anti-corruption reform that started to happen 10 years ago. And yeah, so 2 days ago, something I would say very dangerous happened here in Ukraine, because in Ukrainian parliament, the MPs, they voted for the law, and the number of the law is 12414. And this law was registered by the Zelenskyy faction party to the parliament, and they voted so quickly. They voted like in 2 hours. And moreover, we were shocked. So we started our cardboard peaceful protest. We call it a cardboard because, I mean, we try to find the boxes like in our offices, in our nearest shops, post offices, services, and we write like the messages we have the concerns about. So it's totally peaceful. And that evening, me and a lot of like hundreds and of other people, they went to the presidential office asking what's happening, so what's going on. And we were just screaming the very peaceful, I would say, words: please do not vote the war, please, President Zelenskyy, put veto to the law, please do not sign the law. Because according to Ukrainian legislation, the law becoming real after the parliament has voted for the law and president has signed the law. So we were begging him, please do not sign the law, please do not do that. And I can't forget that minute. I was standing, it was 11 in the evening, 11 p.m., and I was standing next to his office, and hundreds of other people also were standing next to me. And directly at that moment, we were singing the national anthem of Ukraine, «Ще не вмерла Україна». And somebody from the crowd, they told us, oh my God, he signed the law, he signed the law. And I was like, I can't believe that could not happen. And I was trying to open my phone, and I just checked the website of the parliament, and I saw that there is official page of that law, and I directly saw with my own eyes that he signed a law. So it was happening right the next, like the exact same seconds, the exact same minutes, we were begging him not to sign that and not to sign that law, but he did that. So after that evening, we went home and we were just thinking what to do next. So we just simply did the same thing in same evenings, like yesterday and the day before yesterday, and also we will do the protests today in the evening. So now we only have one option. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems to have worked. I'd like to get your opinion. Why do you think President Zelenskyy forced this bill through in Parliament and then signed it into law so quickly?
I think that the only one reason what happened. So National Anti-Corruption Bureau and SAPO, Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor Office, they started very good job, I would say, for the last 6 months regarding the legal suspicions against the top officials in Ukraine, and those top officials, a lot of them are like friends of Zelensky, and a lot of them are his very close business partners. So, and for the last 6 months, there were a lot of those suspicions in committing crime for those top officials. For example, for the previous minister Chernyshov, or for the head of anti-monopoly committee Kirilenko, or for the business partner, the relative of the business partner, the closest one of Zelensky, Mindich, and a lot of other top officials, and a lot of other MPs. So a lot of other MPs from Sluga Narodu, that's presidential faction, that are the members of the parliament, they also got those suspicions from that NABU and SAPO anti-corruption institutions for the last year. So I think that after the U.S. departure, I mean, let's be honest, after the U.S. departure, after the USA departure from Ukraine, and after the process when the U.S. embassy became so weak, so I think those guys in the parliament, they just felt that there is no longer a bad policeman in the room. And there is no longer so strict, I would say, international conditionalities or financial conditionalities that could simply cut those attempts to ruin, to destroy anti-corruption institutions. And after the U.S. departure, I think they felt that, there is a good option. There is a window of opportunity. We could do that because the EU membership for us is so important, but the EU, as the EU institutions in Brussels, they still be very diplomatic. They still be very, I would say, not weak, but they try not to be so harsh, not to be so pushy in all of those international, I would say, conditionalities and everything. So that's the first reason. And another one, I would say that those attempts from NABU and SAPO to put the closest business partners and friends of Zelensky to the jail for committing corruption crimes became so severe, and there were a lot of them for the last year. So, and they still to be the only one that have the leverage, and they have the real independence from the presidential office. So I would say that's the political reason. The presidential office simply didn't like that they have the totally independent law enforcement institution that could do the investigation and could just give those official legal suspicion to the all of those guys in the government for committing the corruption crimes.
Tell me,
and also because
yes.
And also because of the U.S. departure, we also feel the direct connections. Because I'm working in anti-corruption civil society for the last 10 years. So, and I would say the biggest pressure that we feel right now as anti-corruption activists, so it's coming more and more severe after the U.S. departure. So I directly feel that.
There were a lot of harsh words actually from our foreign minister. He really criticized President Zelensky's decision in this and said Ukraine will never get into the EU as a corrupt nation. We also had Marta Kos, the Commissioner for Enlargement here in Warsaw. She also talked to our station, and she was of the same opinion. So I would say in the European Union, there was a lot of backlash. I guess the big question now is what's next? Now that Zelensky has submitted his own bill, they've passed it through, and it's supposed to restore the independence of the two anti-corruption bodies. What do you expect to come out of this next? Is there going to be consequences for those people that are suspected of corruption within the government, and will they face their day in court?
I have like very detailed understanding what will be happening next. So we just met with Marta Kos in Rome 3 weeks ago or something. So we were discussing. I mean, I have very strict message about that message that Ukraine is a very corrupted state and failed state and blah, blah, blah. But I have like the explanation. So Ukraine is fighting corruption. Ukraine is not hiding corruption. That's why we have very strong institutions and we have very good journalist investigation agencies. That's why you know about all of those corruption scandals, because we work so good just to open those crimes and to fight with that. But I mean, why? So what will happen next? So yeah, the president he registered the law yesterday. So our main demand, like in today's evening, tomorrow, is to vote that law very quickly and to sign that law right directly after the law will be voted by the parliament. So we read the text of the law. It like directly returns everything to the first position. So I think that's still to be like the first good result of our protest. So we still have the result, but it's not enough until we'll have that law signed by the president. I think that happened only because of two reasons. So the EU media had all those photos of doing the protest, very peaceful protest. No aggressive signs, like nothing. So we were just standing and asking not to ruin, not to destroy the anti-corruption reform with a piece of paper, like with a piece of cardboard. So that was very peaceful. And I think that because the EU media and everybody saw that in the Western world. We also had a lot of meetings with the EU partners, with top officials in Brussels. So they simply got, yesterday they got a few messages and official messages explaining, you have the facility plan for the further 5 years for 50 million euros for Ukraine. So guys, we do not like how you managed to fix 3 out of 16 points out of 16 recommendations from that facility plan. So there could be some attempts from EU, as we already understand, just to stop or just to withdraw or just to minimize the further tranche, like the direct financial tranche from EU. And I think that happened because only that they tried to ruin the NABO and SAPO. Because, I mean, that's like, just to make you understand what NABO and SAPO is in anti-corruption reform, it's like the saint cow, a saint cow, in the room. So it's like I would say really independent institutions that really try to do the job. So because, I mean, 1 month ago we had something similar. We have the Bureau of Economic Investigations in Ukraine, and the director of that bureau, he passed very open competition. And it's also is one of the conditionalities from EU to appoint the director of that bureau. And that director, he passed the competition with like internationals in the competitive commission. So everything was very transparent. But the government just simply refused to appoint him. So that was like the first sign for us that something dangerous starts to happen. And after that, but that was not, I would say, the biggest scandal that happened to NABO and SAPO. And only when the NABO and SAPO scandal happened in the parliament, I think the EU top officials, even when they are very diplomatic, even when they are very like they're not tough, so their diplomacy is it's not complimentary, but I mean, they always want to wait, and they have a lot of time, so they give us a lot of chances and so on. But when they heard that the Nabo and Sapo was directly destroyed, so I think they were just shocked. And those statements from the top officials for the last 2 days, though, they happened only because they were really shocked that that really is happening. Because I mean, they were the partners that help Ukraine to establish those institutions for the last 10 years. Because, I mean, we had a lot of dozens of meetings with top officials from EU for the last 2 days. And all of those guys, they were working in the same teams with a previous parliament, with a previous government, helping financially, helping by the resources, helping by their expertise to establish and to create those institutions in Ukraine. So I would think that was like a big, it's not even a scandal, it's like direct sign and from the presidential office directly, whether the EU will close their eyes, and that was like direct message whether it could possibly to cross the red lines.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'd say the combination of the people on the streets, people like you out there protesting, and then of course the reaction of the Europeans, officials in the European Union, and of course across member states, shows that democracy is working. Martina Boguslavets, head and founder of the MEZHA Anti-Corruption Center in Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
And now joining us is our next guest, and this is Peter Zamaleyev, director at the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Hello, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on Ukraine This Week.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, we are looking closely at the Russians' next move. We've seen Russians having military exercises in the Caspian, in the Pacific, in the Arctic, in the Baltic. We know that they're preparing for big exercises in Belarus. And, well, we're starting to see signs that something may be awry this year. What are your thoughts on these upcoming exercises in Belarus? And, you know, I also remember President Zelenskyy warning the West and saying that the, Western partners need to ask their intelligence services what Belarus is doing right now, as well as Russia. So what's your opinion on this matter?
A clear indication that Vladimir Putin has not stepped down from his maximalist goals in Ukraine and actually beyond Ukraine. We've seen how in the last several summers of this war, at least the last 2 summers, he's engaged in covert actions against various European countries, a campaign of arsons and assassination attempts, subterfuge, and many others, and outright terrorism assassination campaign like the one we saw in Spain, targeting some Russian exiles and Ukrainian exiles as well. But quite gallingly, there was an assassination attempt on the head of the Rheinmetall in Germany, which is once again summing up. It is very clear that Vladimir Putin has staked his very political future on the outcome of this war in Ukraine, and by engaging in these actions against European countries, he is hoping that he will increase the pressure on the currently elected governments to actually make peace with Russia. And for him to make peace with Russia would essentially mean cutting off all aid to Ukraine and forcing Ukraine to come to the negotiating table on essentially capitulatory conditions for peace.
Well, it seems like hopefully we're not playing ball with that tactic, and I hope that the corner has been turned in the United States. But if we look at active threats, I mean, some people think that, without Vladimir Putin being able to be successful in Ukraine, the notion that he would attack, say, the Baltics, or that he would attack any NATO country is simply not there. What are your thoughts? Would it be in Vladimir Putin's interest to open this conflict with the West on a new front?
That's a very good question, and I, for example, I'm very cautious when I talk about the threat of this, escalation and a sort of transfer of the hostilities from Ukraine elsewhere. I don't think we are talking necessarily about an outright military aggression against a NATO member state, for example, any of the Baltics or Poland. But like I said, Putin has already engaged in a sort of hybrid warfare against European democracies. He will continue to probe the efficacy and the solidity of the mutual security pact of NATO. And I'm talking about the collective defense chapter 5, if I'm not mistaken, of the NATO charter. There's many different ways to do that. Provoking here and there, and you just mentioned in the lead up to our conversation how Putin is doing it. He will do everything just short of a military invasion, let's say, of a NATO member state, because true enough, he probably cannot afford it at this point, even though several major European players, including France and Germany, are now saying point blank that Europe should get ready for a potential military confrontation, a direct military confrontation with Russia by year 2030. But once again, there are many different ways that Putin can continue to erode the unity of NATO and the collective security component of it, just short of an invasion. Once again, it could be arsons, it could be and will be for sure meddling in the country's elections, various dirty tricks, etc. We've seen all of it before, and unfortunately we'll see more of it going ahead in the future for as long as Vladimir Putin is alive. That's my honest opinion.
Yeah, so what should Europe do? I mean, because you make a really, really good point, and I think it was former Foreign Minister Landsbergis out of Lithuania in some of his last days in office there, he was saying that, we're calling this a hybrid war, but this is actually an active war. Do you think that the European response is adequate, first of all, or maybe the European response should be to use scare tactics and get the European leaders on board to arm themselves to deter any future potential attacks by Vladimir Putin?
Well, it's already happening, and we've seen that the late last NATO summit has produced just those results. I mean, at least on paper, we have European members of NATO who have committed to bumping up their expenditures to up to 5%. Not everyone is on board. Obviously, geographic proximity or distance dictate the sort of level of anxiety one would have about the Russian threat, and so you have players like Spain that is not ready yet to to play this game and to play ball in the way that it should be played, considering the clear and present danger that Russia presents to the European liberal democratic project. Having said that, I will also say there's a very important political component to this. We have actors both within the European Union and NATO who have been acting as pretty much outright Trojan horses within the Union and within NATO as essentially Putin allies. And I'm talking about the Slovakian and respectively Hungarian prime ministers, Mr. Fico and Mr. Orban. They've been doing their utmost to water down Europe's resilience in Europe's commitment to Ukraine's defense. What does one do about that? This is very far-reaching, and this will probably require some, dealing with the root causes of these. And so far, we haven't even seen political will on the part of Brussels to even suspend the voting privileges of these members, even though it's been spoken about and Belgium has actually considered doing this. This should not be delayed any further because Putin is using these various personalities within both NATO and EU to continue weakening these institutions. And considering, once again, the clear and present danger that Russia presents on the continent, these matters have to be solved sooner rather than later.
I agree. Unfortunately, sometimes the European Union getting everybody together to act is like herding cats. Peter Zamaliev, Director at the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of Ukraine This Week. Join us again next week for all the latest developments from the war in Ukraine. Thanks for watching. I will see you then. Goodbye.